Hi, I'm Al Dominic, and I'm the CEO of Director Core and also the host of Looking Ahead. And we welcome you to this special COVID edition of the program where we're going to talk about healthcare. And to do so, I've invited to join me remotely from Chicago, Ken Kaufman of Kaufman Hall. Ken serves as the chair and one of the firm's founding partners of this exceptional management consultancy that provides our clients with strategic financial planning, performance improvement, partnerships, M&A advice, and treasury and capital markets perspectives. So we really thought that having Ken here would help elevate some of the conversations that are taking place around what's happening in the health sector today and where it might be heading. You know, for so many industries, the last 6 months has really put pressures that none of us had expected onto key executives. And so we thought, let's look out and try to make sense of the world in which we live. You know, for so long, it was Walmart, CVS, United. They were doing deals. People were talking about them. Now it seems like they're buying everything but hospitals. You can take that a little bit further and look at Amazon and Google. They don't seem to want to be in hospitals. So, Ken, I've got 5 questions for you. And the first one really goes to these larger nonprofit hospitals and trying to make sense of how they're responding to the challenges that COVID put in front of them. So first, my welcome. And second, how's that for an opening question?
Thanks, Al, and thanks for the invitation. I think that that American healthcare and the not-for-profit hospital sector feels besieged from every corner at the moment. COVID has hit the sector really hard. You may remember that it was a double whammy. The first thing that happened was that COVID arrived, and every American hospital had to get ready for it, whether it actually wound up in their hospital or not. And then the second thing that happened was even more dramatic, and that is, as a protective device, American hospitals had to pretty much cancel all elective surgery for what was probably a period of at least 6 weeks. And as a result, revenue during that period dropped in most hospitals across the United States by 40%. The question is, how do you respond to this? How do you reorganize your organization? What's going to happen with the cost structure? And how do you recognize the new competition? And what do you do with the new competition? The new competition being CVS, Walmart, United Health, and last but absolutely not least, Amazon. Hospital organizations are trying to figure out where is this, where is this going, and what is it going to mean for them, and what kind of steps do they have to take? They're looking very closely at their cost structure because it's very possible that overall revenue will not get back to where it was before pre-COVID. Everybody is maybe about 5% down right now. A lot of places are more than 5% down. So that means that the pre-COVID cost structure probably is completely wrong. Hospitals have been very reluctant to attack that at this point because they don't want to compound the problem with a public relations problem. How to deal with Walmart, how to deal with CVS, how to deal with the organizations that want to really be in the cash side of the healthcare business and maximize their strong points of knowing how to deal with retail and how to create a retail patient base. So you can see that the hospital executives that you were talking about are really trying to figure out what's our next move, how do we do this right, and what's going to happen next, and it's a humbling management experience right now.
Yeah, and humbling, I think, is a entirely appropriate word, because you think about these businesses that have been developed over the years where there's opportunities to serve patients, to do well for their communities, to grow organically. I'm kind of curious to get your take across not just the health sector, but many industries. M&A for years has been a catalyst for growth. Are you seeing M&A deals right now in the not-for-profit space in any shape or form? Like, how do you make sense of what's going on there?
Yes, there are deals. There were 19 not-for-profit deals in the third quarter. And over the last 10 years or so, we've probably averaged anywhere from 85 to 105 deals a year. So 19 is a little short of what it's been, but still pretty good given that people were able to maintain a level of attention to get the deals done, right? Um, and so you know what we're seeing here is sort of the adjunct to the question that you just asked before, and that is if you're going to have to compete with Amazon and with CVS and with Walmart, these are gigantic American corporations. And most healthcare, not-for-profit healthcare organizations, if you asked me what is a big not-for-profit healthcare organization, you would say $10 billion is a very big not-for-profit healthcare organization, and that's just tiny compared to Amazon or CVS. CVS is $260 billion. So these organizations want to get bigger. And obviously, when you look at this kind of competitive situation, you're not going to get bigger organically. You're not going to be able to keep your pace in the competitive environment by getting bigger organically. So M&A obviously has been playing an important role, and most likely will play an even more important role going forward.
Yeah, so maybe you can build on that and talk a little bit about how you're seeing the current pandemic affecting the future of the private healthcare space.
Well, so what's going to happen? What the first question you have to ask is how wounded is the not-for-profit healthcare space? What has happened to smaller and medium-sized organizations? We don't really know that yet because we're not seeing really good financial information at this point. Certainly, our sense of what we're seeing is that the sector is, I would say, somewhat wounded. And in that regard, all of those organizations will have decisions to make as they come out. So if they've been harmed from a revenue point of view, and they've been harmed from a profitability point of view, and they've been harmed from a capital capacity point of view, then they're probably looking for partners because their executive team and their board is going to say, well, there's no place for us right here. And so that's sort of one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is the bigger organizations who have managed through all of this in a fairly effective way. They might say, well, now is going to be a really good opportunity to get bigger because there's going to be a larger populations of organizations who are going to be open to having partnership and merger or acquisition discussions. And so one thing we saw in the third quarter is that if you ask, is what is the characteristic of the not-for-profit transaction right now? The average transaction is getting bigger, but most indicative and interesting is that the average size of the seller is getting larger. And that tells you that historically we've had small and medium-sized organizations who have felt the pressures first, but now we're beginning to see larger organizations feel those same pressures. That may very well lead to a significant amount of consolidation in the not-for-profit hospital vertical.
Yeah, and I appreciate that perspective. And if you're talking about kind of large franchises being built, I'm going to smile because you're reminding me that the last movie I watched on an airplane was the Fast and the Furious, like 17 or whatever the iteration was. And it just makes me smile because I know you wrote a book that kind of played off of that. And I think it was Fast and Furious, the transformation of the health sector or healthcare's transformation. It was along those lines. It kind of leads into a final question for you. As much as there's pressures and pains being applied to the industry, there's also investments that people are making, and they're trying to use creative approaches to solving real business issues today. So when it comes to innovation, should we be thinking about improvements in payments, how artificial intelligence is driving new R&D efforts? Where do you look at this transformation being front and center right now?
Well, I think what people are thinking about mostly. Well, the thing that happened, we should mention this first, is over history, recent history. Hospitals have turned out to be very poor users of telehealth and virtual health mechanisms. And there's a lot of reasons for that that we won't go into right now. But it was strange because you were seeing all other industrial verticals go as fast as they could to virtual, and healthcare was digging in their heels. Well, then you get to the COVID where nobody wants to actually come to see their doctor or go to a hospital, and all of a sudden virtual just went absolutely nuts, and you had this ramp up of telehealth. So the questions that are really being asked right now, the central question is what is going to be the relationship of technology to the healthcare transaction? So in the past, you would define the basic, you and I would define the basic healthcare transaction as you're not feeling well, you call up your doctor, he says, come in on next Thursday, you go in, you see him, he gives you a diagnosis, he maybe prescribes, you go away and do it. It's all a physical activity. And so now the question that's being asked is have we crossed the threshold to where virtual will now claim a very significant portion of the healthcare transactions, and then what will be the fallout from that happening? So, for instance, one thing might be is and we're getting calls from this is that hospitals might say, "Wow, we've got all sorts of real estate we don't need anymore because if we're going to have all these transactions virtually, then maybe we don't need that office building, or we don't need this," and so that could be a new way of organizing and a new way of looking at transactions. The next thing that happens is what's the extension of telehealth? So here's the deal. What was the first virtual banking arrangement? It was the ATM. And if banks had stopped at the ATM, then that would have been a colossal fail for the banking industry, because the good banks realized that the ATM was only a very early version of what you could do virtually. And now, of course, what they did is move to apps, and there are millions of people across the United States who do all their banking on their iPhone right now. So by extension to that, telehealth is really the ATM. That's all it is right now. And if it stays that way, it's, as I said before, relative to banking, it's a colossal fail. So what are we going to do with telehealth? How are we going to make that truly a virtual experience in the same way that Jeff Bezos would define a virtual experience? And then how does data from the telehealth event get pulled into it? And how does then artificial intelligence get integrated and coordinated with that to invent a different way of taking care of people? And that's what we're kind of on the verge of. And so the question that hospital executives are asking themselves, is that where Amazon is headed from a healthcare perspective? Is that where really Walmart wants to go and CVS wants to go? And if that's the case, can not-for-profit hospitals get there just as effectively and just as quickly in order to stem a competitive threat?
Well, Ken, you have given us a ton of food for thought. And I love that example, the parallel of banking to healthcare, two heavily regulated industries, but also fundamental to our country's long-term success and also our individual day-to-day lives. So I appreciate you looking ahead with us. Again, I'm Al Dominic. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.